my work is in physics. It's my expertise. I'm studying string theory and physics at San Francisco State University. And I've developed a theory that explains how these kinds of redirections happen to us. That there's an actual process by which we receive useful information at the right time in order to help us move forward with our goals. My intended outcomes with you today are to help you notice road signs and determine how to respond to them. Not every single thing that happens in your life is going to be something you're going to want to jump on and respond to. So how do we notice them and determine how to respond? I'm going to share with you how to turn obstacles into guidance. How to take those things that get in your way and see how they may be redirecting you in a useful way. And finally, how to separate what you need from how you expect it to happen. So the main question we're going to ask today is, what do we do when we get blocked? How many of you are familiar with that question in your own life? That's what I thought. That's why I asked it. I am going to propose that coincidence-informed decision-making can help you find new business, like it did with me. It can help you lower your stress in your everyday work experience. It can help you adapt quickly to new information. And it can help you increase the effectiveness of what you're doing with your clients. Some useful clues that we're going to be pointing to in order to tell whether something's meaningful is triggering your sureness button. How many of you know where your sureness button is? Your sureness button is that place in yourself where you say, oh, I know how that's going to go. I'm fine. I don't need any help. Or I don't need any suggestions. This is all going to work out a certain way. And sometimes when we have that button triggered, it actually is an indication that we need to start paying a little more attention because things are going to go wrong and we need to be ready for that. I'll tell you a story about that in a minute. I told you a story about checkmate. This is an experience where you have nothing else you can do. You're stuck. And this is a good opportunity to step back, look at the things going on around you, and determine whether there's something you can pay attention to that's redirecting you in some useful way. Again, it's about looking for the redirection and noticing it and being able to jump on it. Another thing that can be a clue about whether you need to be paying attention to redirections is checking your assumptions. Do you assume things are going to go a certain way? This is related to your sureness button. And how are those assumptions limiting your options about what you might need to choose or pay attention to? And finally, a good tool is to step out of the ordinary, to try something a little unusual that brings about some new opportunities for you. So we're going to talk about all of these. And you can see here we have a tree. This tree represents, here we are at the bottom of the tree. And each branch represents some decision you can make. Every time you make a decision, you take a different branch of the tree. If I walk right out of here and I talk to Michael, I'll have a different experience that leads to a different set of outcomes on the right. And if I walk left and I am talking to Janet, I'll have a different set of experiences. These apples represent outcomes that we are aiming for. An apple is something, represents a goal that we might have. And when the apples end up on a branch, what happens to the branch? It bends, it gets heavier, right? You see how they sort of bend slightly downwards. So the weighting of those apples creates a probability or a weight for each of these branches, each of these possible futures that you might experience. So lowering stress, you know, a lot of the stress I had in my job, which was doing software programming, was around logistics that would fall apart, or I wouldn't have the information I needed when I needed it. And so I had this experience once where I had a report to deliver at 9 a.m. on Friday. It was only Tuesday, and it was almost done. I had an hour's worth of work. So I'm thinking to myself, I'm fine. I'm going to be great. No worries. That was my sureness button, right? That was my assumptions coming up. And a colleague walked up and said, do you need any help with that report? I got some time. I'd be happy to help. And I said, no, I got it covered. Right? She said, no, really? I mean, are you sure you don't need any help? I said, no, I'm fine. I'm almost done. Now, how many of you recognize this as maybe an opportunity where I missed the chance to avoid a problem? Right? So my sureness button was triggered, and I was perfectly fine in where I was, and I wish I had listened to her, because the remainder of the day was caught up with some urgent thing that came up at work, but that was fine. I had 2 more days. Well, then that night, a family emergency came up, and I was out of the office for 2 days. So I arrived in the office on Friday morning, having been sort of out of touch for a couple days, at 8:30, and realize I have a report due at 9, and I still have an hour's worth of work to do on it. So immediately I realized in retrospect that this offer of help was actually helping solve a problem I didn't even know I was going to have. It's the hook on that branch of the tree that came along to help me out that I missed. And so I sit there and I drink a lot of coffee and I rush through it and I argue with the printer and I print it backwards on one side and I finally get to the meeting 2 minutes late without a pencil and I hand out my report. And I'm stressed out and I'm not at my best. But that was all avoidable if I had seen the sign of redirection on Tuesday when the colleague had out of the blue offered some help on this project. And we have to use our own discernment to determine whether it is important to follow such an action. But the main point I want to get across today is how to step back, how to notice when to step back and take a look and assess your situation a little more closely. So in this example, I'm at work and I need to be ready for a meeting. Those are all the branches of the tree in which I'm ready for the meeting, the stars. And if we project back, we have the same probabilities, just to keep it simple. And so the hook in this case is a colleague offering to help. Comes out of the blue. And if I follow that hook, well, I have two choices, right? I can accept the help, in which case I have a 70% chance of meeting my deadline. And I can turn down the help, in which case I'm stuck at like a 40% chance. And that's what I did. I turned down the help and something came up on one of these branches where emergency came up at home and ended up in a situation where I was not at my best. I missed the opportunity. So in this case, the model is checking your assumptions. One question.
Would it be also that instead of thinking, I know all the answers, I'm going to see if somebody else has something to contribute to the situation?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, questioning what we are sure about in terms of in a meeting when we're talking about some new topic or some solution that needs to happen. I found myself often pretty sure about where we needed to go, but missing clues from different team members that were actually quite useful. And I often couldn't tell whether they were useful until later, a few hours later or a few days later, and then go, oh, that comment that was made was really helpful. And so part of the process that I hope I can help you develop is to keep those in your brain, to notice them, and you don't have to respond right away. You can let them percolate for a while, but make sure you hold on to those signs of redirection so that when it becomes clear that you do need to listen, you've got it in your head.